The parents of the alleged Oxford High School shooter made their first court appearance since entering not guilty pleas during their arraignment when they were brought up on involuntary manslaughter charges. James and Jennifer Crumbly appeared before a judge for a probable cause conference in Rochester Hills District Court. You can see both of them sitting inside of the courtroom with their masks on. To dive a little bit deeper into this, we want to bring on Andrew Shirkowski, former federal prosecutor. Andrew, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. And it's such an interesting story to talk about because it's so far outside of what we usually see in these scenarios. And it's so terrible to have a baseline to judge that by, but we really haven't seen anything like this in recent years.
Yeah, most definitely. We knew that Ethan Crumbly, their son, was going to be facing some major charges, but now the parents being brought into this, how common is that?
It's not common at all, because what you're really looking for in even having the option to charge the parents is that they had to have some sort of recklessness, some sort of gross negligence at a minimum in their involvement in the actual murders themselves. So they would have had some reason why they knew that there was a shooting that was planned or something of that nature. And I think that what's interesting in this case is that they have evidence that they obtained that gun just a week before. And so I think the prosecutors are really going to have to show how the parents would have had some sort of idea that the son would have been likely to use it or was intending to use it, something of that nature. That's what makes this a unique case.
Right. So we have the evidence of the gun being bought just days before that, and then also some texts that were exchanged between Ethan and his mother, Jennifer. And so is this enough evidence for them to be prosecuted?
Well, you see some text messages generally showing the mother kind of being in a supportive role over the son or something of that nature. I think the prosecutors are going to have to show that she knew more than just a son who was having a hard time or maybe had some sort of negative thoughts in his head, but really had some sort of stated intent to do harm or violence to others, and that she encouraged it, essentially, that she had some role in bringing about the furthering of the crime, not just failing to talk to somebody about it, but really having some sort of affirmative role. I think that's what the prosecutors are definitely going to want to show a jury in this case, because again, it is very unusual to try to hold the parents responsible for what a child did where the parents weren't even there.
Do you find this to be a unique case with the parents' involvement with Ethan and what he did? Or do you think that future cases of possibly school shootings and kids being able to access a handgun, do you think that they are also going to be prosecuted? The parents are going to be looked into further now because of this case?
I think there are some very troubling pieces of evidence that we've started to see, at least in the media and publicized in this case so far. Things that make you really wonder what the Crumbleys must have been thinking. I don't know if it's going to be criminal yet. That's what the process is here for, and it's going to be a long time. And obviously, their defense attorneys have each even made statements that have indicated that it's only part of the story. So I think it's going to take a lot of time to really understand why the prosecutors not only are troubled by it, but why they're convinced that there was a criminal element to it, what the parents specifically should have done to have stopped this violence, or what they did to encourage the violence, and perhaps even more than just having brought a firearm into the house, that they would have known that they're bringing it in because the son wanted to use it or had some sort of stated intent. So I think the prosecutors are going to need to come forward with even more evidence that we've seen, because all we have right now is evidence that causes concern, not evidence that proves beyond a reasonable doubt criminal involvement.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with this being, a possible standard moving forward, where could you draw the line with parents being held responsible for what their kids are doing? Maybe a hunting knife at home being utilized to stab and kill someone. Could that be held against the parents?
Well, and it's very scary to think with our rights under the Second Amendment and how people choose to utilize those rights, whether they have firearms in the home. Does this automatically mean that there will be charging of parents in the future of school shootings? I don't see that as the case. I see this as a somewhat unique case in that the prosecutors have already been able to demonstrate a high amount of involvement of the parents, having received some degree of idea of the threat that was at hand, and their encouragement for the son to remain at the school school and their facilitation of having brought a weapon into the home a week earlier. Those are all particularly unique circumstances if the prosecutors really can weave that common thread of their knowledge, an elevated degree of knowledge of a risk there. So just because something like this happens, I don't think automatically you'll see that, but we certainly are sending or seeing a message sent that parents do have some degree of responsibility to alert authorities, or at least not help their children carry out the things that they're saying are in their minds, or those bad acts that some children can execute. And so, you know, there's that fine line. At what degree are you responsible for your children, and do you have to bring risks to the authorities' attention? And then on the other hand, at what point is a young person's decisions that are independent of the parents' control that person's own decisions? Very, very deep questions here, and not something we've seen a long precedent of.
Andrew, last question for you. What do you foresee as the future for these two, and then also for their son, Ethan, who actually was the one pulling the trigger?
Well, the actions of Ethan cannot be condemned harshly enough. I'm sure that he will be facing a very high degree of punishment for the allegations against him if they're able to prove it all beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's yet to be seen. But with the parents, I think that we see a tougher prosecution ahead. I think that they're going to have to do more than just demonstrate that the parents had some reason to be concerned about their son's well-being, but that they really knew that there was a violent intent, or that there was a more specific intent to carry out that violence, and that buying that weapon or bringing that weapon in the home was that big of a mistake, because they actually knew that there was a real potential that he would use that. So a lot to be seen in terms of what the evidence shows in that regard. Text messages and all sorts of other digital evidence, I think, will come out later that we don't even see right now. But a lot to learn on that case, and how exactly the prosecutors think the parents could have stopped this.
And a possible timeline on this: weeks, months?
Well, we're not going to see a trial on this for many more months. I would say in the 6 to 9 month range is usually the minimum from the time of arraignment in these sorts of circumstances. And so we'll start to see some discovery and some evidence more than what we have now over those months. But I think it's going to be quite some time before we actually get this case in front of a jury. And I don't think that there's a great likelihood of a deal here unless the prosecutors are really willing to shell out low jail time. So I think the evidence has yet to come out. The defense attorneys seem to be making their positions very strongly known, that their clients are not willing to plead guilty here, and I think this case could very well be headed to a trial.
Well, a distraught James and Jennifer Crumbly right there in a courtroom earlier today. Will be taking every single aspect of this case moving forward, as well as with Ethan Crumbly. Andrew Tchaikovsky, thank you so much for being with us here on the show. We appreciate it.
Thank you.